Great. Welcome to the weekly ACG New York podcast series. Delighted to have you listening to us today. ACG is the largest and most influential committee-steered member-based network for the global middle market private capital community. The network, of course, focuses on promoting best practice, knowledge, and intelligence for capital providers, industry executives, and those that service them, whilst providing a platform for concierge networking, deal-making, and fundraising. And the ACG New York Weekly podcast invites members, guests, and our partners to discuss key themes and topics in the world of global middle market private equity. And today I'm very pleased to have with us Anna Samorukova of the Edelweiss Group. How are you today, Anna?
Very good. Thank you, Vic.
Wonderful. Perhaps, Anna, I was going to maybe go into this a little bit later, but if you wouldn't mind conveying a little bit more about yourself and what you do and your remit within the firm, because that will segue into nicely the topic and your expertise with it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Vic. And thank you very much for our conversation today, for inviting me to talk about the situation and challenges that we're all experiencing.
Yeah.
Edelweiss Group, what we do, I founded Edelweiss Group and Edelweiss Academy of Mastery. And what we do is we help people and organizations advance their potential with breakthrough tools and learning experiences. And by breakthrough tools, I mean various frameworks and processes that could be easily applied to resolve a certain challenge or go through a certain problem. That's what we do. My background goes back to close to 20 years ago. I started teaching finance in business simulations for large organizations like GE, Microsoft, Boeing. And I did that for 15 years. And when the time came for me to stop traveling and stay a little more local, I expanded my studies and experience in the space of motivation, game-based learning, and then change management and neuroscience. So it's kind of a full circle coming together in what we currently teach and the frameworks we develop.
Yeah, and I see there, Anna, you're set up in a nice picturesque environment. Aesthetics are very pleasing. And with your background, which you've nicely explained, thank you very much. I thought we could talk about today, Anna, everyone working remote. We now see that our time working at home has now got to be extended, especially where the virus is still prevalent. And how do you go about, not just as an individual, but how organizations go about motivating their workers, their workforce in such a time? It's unprecedented. So perhaps if you wouldn't mind, we can maybe start by asking, it's a crazy period. As I mentioned, I think it's surreal, and I know that's cliched to say, but have you ever known anything like this? And with that, what type of woes and things that are your clients asking of you, and what, from a 50,000 foot view perspective, how do you go about motivating people in this state? And we'll delve deeper into it as we go along.
And a great question, Vic. And there's certainly different ways and approaches and tools and methodologies to motivate people. But really for us to understand how we can motivate people to stay productive, stay focused, stay collaborative, engaged in this distant space when we don't see them in the face-to-face situations, it is very challenging. So we want to go and kind of understand the impact the current situation has on all of us, whether we're leaders or we're just team members, employees, leadership managers. So all of us are experiencing the same kind of impact. The way how we respond to this kind of impact and experience, that varies. So that brings us to the three foundational dimensions that we want to understand, so that will help us come up with some tools and strategies to support and motivate our teams and our people. And the first one is how the events that we're experiencing and the information, not only events, but the information also that's coming at us, how that impacts our reptile part of our brains. That's neuroscience. The second part is psychology, how every one of us responds to that kind of impact on a very individual level, because every one of us is unique and we have our own beliefs and patterns. And the third one is really our social needs that would impact our motivation, the elements of motivation. And the question whether I experienced anything like this before, no, I have not experienced anything like this before. I've been teaching the change management and change facilitation. So, and usually in the change environment, when we go through the process change within the organization or a business model change or a leadership change, the owners, mergers, acquisitions, it's a perfect example of a change. There's usually only certain elements that are impacted for the employees. What we're experiencing now in the current environment is it impacts us, the current situation, events plus the information and circumstances. They impact us at every single level of our lives, personal, professional, families, smaller families, big extended families, our communities, everything is impacted at every single level. So a few weeks ago, I called it a multidimensional disruption. We can certainly look at it from a more positive perspective, multidimensional transformation, but it is a multidimensional disruption because it impacts us at every single level. And for us to get to the understanding how we can help our employees and help keep them motivated, we want to understand kind of different levels of this multidimensional disruption that we're experiencing.
Yeah. Now, we're all experiencing these, lack of motivation. Certainly I am. I will say that as we get deeper into being isolated, quarantined, it's becoming increasingly frustrating. But I will ask, how much of a concern is keeping your employees motivated at this time? Because most management, certainly the ones that I speak to, the people that are listening, are really so concentrated on a plethora of things within their organizations. How important is it to keep tabs with your workforce and how they're motivated and what they're seeing dimensionally around them, being apt for them to be still within the same culture, a decent mind frame, and motivated? So what would you say to that? Should it be such a concern?
Should it be? Let's think about, maybe we can look at it from a different perspective. What if our employees, our people are not motivated? What's going to be, what are we going to experience in that situation? You have potential impact on quality of work, deliverables to your customers, whether it's internal role or customer facing role. You can have all kinds of impacts that are coming out from your folks not being motivated. And the motivation is, there are 4 elements of motivation, or 4 principles of motivation. And I do recommend, if anyone is interested in this topic, to read the book by Daniel Pink called Drive. That will give more perspective into these 4 elements that I use. The motivation itself as a concept, as a model, was first developed in the self-determination theory, and that was rephrased in some ways by Daniel Pink. So that's what I use in my work. The 4 elements is the sense of autonomy, sense of relatedness, sense of mastery, and sense of purpose. So all of us we all need to be motivated or supported at all of these 4 levels. And the extreme of the current situation is that all of the 4 areas of motivation are being very much impacted in the current environment. In the change situation where we have organizational changes or process changes, there are usually maybe 1 or 2 that are impacted. And now we're experiencing everything, both as I said, at both at personal level and professional levels. So if your people are not motivated to do the work, then it's going to impact the quality of work. And then we want to look at these 4 elements from a sense of autonomy perspective. Sense of autonomy is my sense of choice, sense of control, and it is hugely impacted right now in the current environment. So usually what we see, the kind of reactions, before I dive into deeper how it impacts us, is usually what we experience when our sense of control is impacted in such a dramatic way. We can see confrontation. People may react differently to that. We can see confrontation, we can see withdrawal, we can see some tension in relationships and collaboration. And you may be experiencing that, although we see all of great things, how people are collaborating in the virtual space, but there are also these things that are coming up from the underlying layers of my basic needs are not being met, and my my sense of choice and control is really very much intruded right now. I don't have any of that. So there is a reaction that people will be experiencing from this, whether they express it in their collaborative space or whether they express it in their home environments. But there's an impact and there's a reaction.
Mm.
It could be, again, expressed in very visual terms, or it could be kind of held back by individuals. So how we express that varies from person to person. That's where psychology kicks in. So from a sense of autonomy, we don't have choice of where we work, right? We are constrained to our homes to do work in that specific space. We don't have choice of going to the stores we want to go to. We don't have much choice where we go and meet with friends. We don't have choice in so many other areas. So it impacts the choice that's being taken away from us is at all different levels, the personal, extended family, and work as well. So the next one is the sense of relatedness. And that is also impacted at both the personal level and work level. Relatedness is feeling a sense of being a part of the community or part of the team. Now within the family, we're experiencing that, and some of those family ties, they are being more nourished currently, or there may be other extremes because people may be living in different conditions. So if there's a very small space where they live, that may trigger the limitations of the space, because every one of us needs space to reconnect with who we are. And if we don't get that space, that may be expressed in different ways. So because not all of us have the space, not everybody has the country setting, not everybody has this kind of opportunity and possibility to really reconnect and clear all of the emotions and clear all of the thoughts. So that may be impacting how your people do the work and how they react in specific situations. So everything can be, if at work everything is going smoothly, that will help people. But if there are stressors, if there are problems, if there are challenges, supply chain is disrupted, your customer chain is disrupted, customers are not buying the way you expected, so all of this is impacted. So there are problems. And there are challenges for organizations to pivot, to adjust, and maybe for some organizations even to reinvent themselves. So when there are these challenges and people are constrained, they may not be responding to those challenges in the best possible ways. Mm. So they may be overreacting. There could be confrontation. There could be withdrawal. And also that limits the innovative thinking and the creativity of people. So in terms of relatedness, if we don't see our people from our team in the way that we used to work with them, we are trying to make that up through the video calls and all of those all that kind of communication, and it works very well. It is great that can be done. But again, just remembering that being on a video call the whole day, it creates a different types of stress and a different type of tension. So I think we're all being a little overwhelmed with the video calls and online, the screen time all the time, the whole day. So we need a break from that as well. In terms of masteries, people are, it's whether I'm progressing, whether I'm really good at what I do, what is my future. So the sense of mastery, the way it may be impacted now is through the concerns of the job future, through the concerns, through having to learn to do things in a new way, right? So again, that's a sense of autonomy, because I'm now forced to do things in a different way from what I used to. It's not my choice, and I have to do it. So, and if people are concerned about jobs, then it impacts our sense of, I am good at what I do. I am confident in what I do. And yes, whatever happens, I can always find a job. So that's being impacted tremendously because of everything that we're seeing and experiencing. And again, once those thoughts kick in, the way people would respond to that or react without even realizing that they're overreacting to that, that may vary from person to person. And then the fourth one is the sense of meaning, the sense of purpose is, and it's a great motivator that helps us get through the challenges. And it works extremely well if the sense of meaning does exist when there's an organizational change or process change. When we are experiencing the magnitude of events we are experiencing, that sense of meaning is extremely important to have, because when we don't have a sense of meaning, we are constrained back into our sense of our apartment and boxed into our jobs. So we want to help people see the bigger picture, and see how what they do in their day-to-day jobs, even if their jobs are internal, how what they do impacts the world, impacts community, impacts like everyone else. So we want to have that, really pay attention to, are we expanding that sense of meaning in people? Because it's extremely easy to fall into this box, or I'm worthless. I'm so, every time I go into something, I always face the situations. I'm so unlucky. I'm not good enough. And it's really easy to fall into this kind of sense of mind. Yeah. And if we do, again, the reactions could vary from person to person.
I'm sure a lot of those states that you mentioned are resonating with individuals and their collective groups as well. If I can home in on the individuals, you may be out of work now, you may be, in such a restricted capacity with whatever you're dealing with at the workplace, with your colleagues, whatever it may be. What is, just focusing in on the individual again, what are some of the tools and techniques that you would suggest that people can imbibe to just keep their clarity, keep their spirits upbeat? And then we'll ask the same about the organization as well, what they can do to help their employees at home.
Yes, and this is a great question and a great point, Vic, because we can do only so much as leaders, as managers, to help our people from the motivation perspective, and we can dive into, we'll dive into that a little later. From an individual perspective, really to transformation and ability to leap through these challenges and pivot and support the organization, it really has to come from within every individual. So at the individual level, and also for leaders and managers, they are being impacted, like all of you are being impacted in very similar ways. So you almost have like a double responsibility, because you have to take care of yourself first. And so because you are impacted in a very similar way, but you also have responsibility for your teams. And for your teams, you can support them in different ways with different tools and methodologies. Really, to at the individual level, there are three things that I teach, and I have been stressing them once we got into this situation and started experiencing all of these challenges. Is the very first thing is to notice how the events and information that is around us, how it's impacting our thoughts. That's the very first thing. Because we may be tied to watching television for an hour, but we don't notice how all of the information is impacting our brain. And so once we notice those thoughts, we also want to notice how those thoughts make us feel. And again, it happens in such a quick way, we don't even notice it, like in milliseconds. The brain perceives what's coming at us as a threat, and then the thoughts are triggered, and then those thoughts make us feel in a certain way, and those feelings that get stuck in the body, in our heads, in our shoulders, whatever it is, and then those emotions, then there's a reaction, and the reaction depends on every individual person, depends on their psychology, depends on their beliefs and patterns. So, and this is what we don't notice, and this is what many people don't realize. So what I recommend at the individual level for everyone is first notice, and do it as a practice. Watch TV for 15 minutes, or listen to the news, or read the news on the internet, and notice what thoughts are being triggered and how those thoughts make you feel. And then connect with those emotions, stay with those emotions. You don't have to, absolutely don't criticize yourself that you're feeling all of that. You want to embrace whatever came up for you. You want to embrace that and really connect with it. Without criticism, without self-judgment. We'll have our own inner critics there, so you just want to embrace that. And once you embrace those emotions, that will help to regulate them easier and better. There are certain tools I can share, but the very big thing is just notice what you're seeing and hearing, how that impacts your thoughts, emotions, and your overall stress level.
Yeah. Are there a lot of reading and thoughts around being occupied by learning at this time, keeping your thoughts engaged to a particular tunnel, if you like, and just remaining positive that way? So it is turned into a bit more of a learning environment that certainly organizations are stressing. What would you say around that? And perhaps if you would speak to that, please.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing it up, Vic, because learning, it has a natural capacity of activating our positive neurons in our brain. So learning in and of itself is a huge supporter for us to get through the challenges. The key here is that learning is self-selected, as self-selected as possible, not imposed, not mandatory. So to give people as much choice as they can in the whatever learning opportunities there are. I know there are many organizations that are introducing kind of self-run internal quarantine type universities where your team members or even extended company they have certain time once a week or twice a week, or once every other week, where people share whatever they learn, so everybody else can learn that. But it is self-managed and it is self-selected, because with this we are actually getting into some of the techniques how you can support motivation. Is what are some areas that you can give people choice, and if you create the self-select kind of learning space for people, then there are two positive things out of it. First, it's by choice. They have a choice what they do, how they do it, what they learn, whom they engage with. Mm-hmm. And the second, learning that they enjoy, learning something that they want to learn, will help to activate positive neurons in the brain. So speaking more scientific terms, but really it makes us think better, because and the other element to that is that when we feel that we learn something, our mastery levels or sense of mastery, they also go up. So we are kind of we're integrating all of the four elements of motivation there as well. And if we're learning with something that's meaningful, that also supports the purpose. For example, someone wanted to learn how to play guitar for like 5 years, never got to it, right? And then your social time within your team, somebody shared very easy techniques how to play guitar. Of course, it's not business related, but it's something that will help people feel better. And it will flow into your work environment and how they collaborate, how they are motivated, and also how productive they are.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's one of the silver linings in all of this, isn't it? That you're being able to do things that you weren't necessarily being able to do before. But are you seeing a lot of folk that are coming to you with questions around self-coaching, keeping that good mindset going? You mentioned that a university program that companies are sort of fostering out there. Can you maybe give a bit more detail and color around that? That seems very, very interesting. What can some other organizations that are not doing that and listening in, what can they be doing? Maybe that, and apart from that.
Self-coaching is a great topic. Actually, I have developed a program for self-coaching that's for individuals. So not everybody has to be on the managers and leadership shoulders. Not everything has to be on bringing coaches in. A lot of this work that we can do to really transform ourselves, and this is an opportunity for personal transformation, is to use self-coaching techniques to tune in, to understand how we react, why we react this way, and to learn the techniques to neutralize that, because we all have on the inner side of us, we all have a huge capacity to be innovative, creative, compassionate. So we all have these qualities, but because all of the threats and stressors that come at us, we're not really experiencing this from everybody, right? There's confrontation, disengagement, people can be a little rough here and there, they can not talk. So all of this but this is more just an emotional layers of protection. But all of us have this inner capacity, and self-coaching is one of the most effective ways for everyone to bring their best selves out. And this is a great opportunity, because when we apply self-coaching in the moment, and this is what we're experiencing, this is in the moment where we don't even have to simulate or come up with scenarios. This is the scenario where you can really tap into your best self and apply the techniques and really just be a very different person when we transform, when we leap through this situation into the future. And in terms of learning activities or learning initiatives that various organizations are doing right now, everybody is approaching a little differently. There's of course a tendency, humongous interest in developing e-learning. E-learning takes a lot of time to develop. Plus, one of the things that I teach when we talk about designing learning for change, to empower change, is any e-learning, anything where it's self-paced, the person is one-on-one with the computer, that has the highest risk of disengagement, because you don't have the community, you don't have the team, you one-on-one with the computer, easily to get distracted, easily to get into your circulation of thoughts, again, triggered by the different events. So one of the things I stress is to really look at the different modalities or different ways the learning is delivered, to understand how that impacts motivation. So when our motivation is impacted in so many different ways, my recommendation is to use as many fun activities as possible, to make it fun, to make it as self-select as possible, self-selected, where people have choice. If you already have some training programs within your company, and just open all of them up for people, and so that people can choose what they want to learn, even if it doesn't have a direct relationship to what they do right now. But if someone is interested to learn something, just open it up for them, because that will help them feel better, and that will in turn will also help the organization, because they will be more productive, they will see the value they will create. Because eventually what we're looking at, why do we need to motivate people, right? Why do we need to help them feel better, is that so that we as an organization can pivot and adjust. And we need as many ideas as we can, right, to find new opportunities, to create new value for our customers, to become more effective with all of the budgetary constraints and all of the financial pressures and supply chain disrupted, right? How can we adjust to this environment? Because within the organization, every part of the organization is impacted. So to make that learning as fun as possible, I wouldn't even rush into creating e-learning. It takes time to make it a very well-made e-learning, but you can create learning that's taught via the computer. I would also recommend mixing it with some kind of a book or some activity that people can do, break out into teams where people can talk and share the experiences. So it's not only screen time, but also something that people can reflect, whether it's a workbook or some kind of form of notes, and just mix it up and make it as live and fun as possible, and also easy. So if we summarize that, self-select as much as possible, give people choice, to the extent that you can, to give them learning, also create the social learning where people can learn anything they want to learn and make it self-run. People come up with their own topics, make it as fun as possible, easy as possible, short as possible as well. And you can also thread the learning throughout your week or a month. So it comes in smaller chunks, but you can also integrate it into your day-to-day activities and make it more like a simulation type of learning. People usually love that.
Yeah. Anna, do you think, a bit more of a broader question, and then we'll tie back into this, but do you think this will fundamentally change cultures within organizations, people's sense of self-worth, self-meaning? Do you think this will have a massive impact on the cultural vagaries within a firm or an organization, or even industries and sectors?
Yes, I do believe that the situation that we're experiencing will impact cultures of the organizations. And just this whole opportunity for people to collaborate together, that will create, if depends on where you were as an organization before, right? If you were more like, not constrained, but you had a very specific structured ways of working, and people in certain workflows constrained or closed up, then this collaborative environment where online, it opened up a certain space for people to experience that collaboration. So that kind of collaboration, if you didn't have it before, people would want that back. And if we think about the culture, it's really when people come together, how they agree, or how the processes are designed for them to work together. So this is how the culture, how they go about problem solving, how they go about doing work, how they go about ideas, collaboration. So that there are so many pieces that go into how our culture gets formed. So yes, in many situations, cultures will be impacted. And some of the things that people are coming up with in how they work right now, they probably will go into the future as well. But one very important thing that I think will come up for all of the organizations is the flexibility and agility of the organization to be able to adjust to whatever happens. So if those organizations that didn't have that capability, that have not developed that capability of being agile in the form like being able to adjust very quickly, because that ability to adjust depends on a number of factors. Are people open to share their ideas? And where the processes allow for adjustment, right? There's so many things at both the people level and the process level. So I think organizations will turn into creating very flexible business models.
What are some of those, in terms of people and processes, some of the telltale signs that, okay, here's an organization that is not as agile or nimble, or is a bit restrictive in its own sense of making this cultural change and the management around it? What are some of the things that you see that you quickly realize and say, right, this firm may need a bit of help?
That's a great question. That's a great question. If let's say the organization, if the processes are so constrained that people have to go through so many layers to bring their idea to the table, then it will resent people from doing that, right? It will repel people from doing that. So that's one of the examples. If things take a lot of time to get a decision on, if those things, they probably will need help to become more agile. You almost like you need like a task force just for that specific problem, solve it and move on. Because if something takes 2 or 3 months, or used to take 2 or 3 months to solve it, come to the decision, that's not feasible to apply in the current environment, right? You need something like that can be done like within a few weeks to be able to adjust. So looking at, if I was to look at where the potential opportunities are to be able to pivot and reinvent where necessary and really come out strong out of this experience, is first, are people motivated to share their ideas? Do they have the support? Do they know the value chain of the organization? If people don't understand what the organization does and they're only constrained to their one little role, then their ability to come up with the ideas is very limited. So we want people to understand how organization creates value and delivers that value to the customer. So you can engage all of your people, not just the leadership team, to that idea generation. And you never know what may come out of that. And do you have a process to support those ideas that are good, right? So the leadership has to be open to ideas coming out from the employees. Look at the processes and look at take some of the biggest decisions that have to be made within the organization, or decisions about the adjustments, and what would it take to make those decisions?
Yeah.
If it takes too long, right? That's an opportunity.
Yeah. Do you think leaders out there are doing their utmost best to imbibe some of the things that you're talking about? For the most part, do you see that? And I think this will, all the goings on will enhance their thinking, and they will have to think about this. But are they doing this already for the most part?
I'm sorry, Vic, could you say it again? Which organization?
Any organization. Do you think, I mean, I know big and small, they're all varied and they all have their internal processes, programs for various different things. But for the most part, do you think leaders are doing enough to motivate in such times and outside of such times?
Well, lean is a methodology, right? And if it's applied, it certainly can provide that benefit. The question is, can lean be applied across across everything within the organization? Because lean usually has been applied to manufacturing, or agile within the software development. And here we want to look at, all right, if we are changing things on the fly, that's another change for people to deal with, right? So there's another cycle or another layer of adoption that people have to, or adapt to, or adjust to. So to be cognizant of that. And that's why you want to have your people in the best possible emotional state, because if there's another change that's coming, to be able to pivot and adjust, then people will have to deal with that change as well, besides like everything else they have to deal with at home and working remotely and all of those things. Yes, certainly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, your state and emotion is obviously very important, but stress is an emotion that right now a lot of people can't get over, particularly leaders. They're going through so many woes. I know you've touched on it, but then with that stress, how they go about communicating some of these changes to workers that are at home, that are already in angst. How do you go about conveying what's the best method and methodology to communicate whatever change is coming their way whilst everyone is stressed out?
That's a great question. And when we talk about communication, of course, there are very basic foundational elements about communication. Communicate often and to be clear and consistent communication. That's from just the traditional change management. What I also teach is just remembering, well, people are in the stress mode, and all of this threat that's coming at them, right? The brain is processing, psychology kicks in, they're limited in the choice and the control they have, they're not connecting with the team that they're used to, all of these things that we talked about. So I also recommend, when we communicate, remember that when people are in stress mode, they are receiving information with the filters of stress. So every information, every piece of information that comes at them, they're going to be either questioning or judging or criticizing. So, and that's where the trust can be at very high risk. So, because if there is anything that people feel they're not being told everything, that will trigger our emotional sense of there's something else, right? And on top of everything else that people experience, that will impact how much trust they have in the information they receive, and very important, how they react to that piece of information. So there are different techniques that I teach to that. It's a little maybe for our next conversation. Just be sensitive to how you communicate. And very important, I also stress, is besides just saying we need to make these changes within the organization to survive or to be successful, provide some provide a little more information. Just take a little bit of time to either prepare or just have a conversation, explain this is how organization works, right? This is the value chain of the organization, and this is where our inflamed points are. This is where we're burning, for example, right? And then just say, so in order for us to fix this and to fix this, we need to do X. And in order to do X, we need to make the change. So take the time to think about the logic of that decision. And certainly there are many times in any change initiatives, information is not available. It's not even that it's being hidden, but the information may not be available. You may not have all of the answers. And there's some information that's still being decided around, right? So you may not be able to provide all the information. So what's important here is to explain also to people, not just say we don't have all of the answers right now, but to explain to people, in order for us to answer this question or to provide this information, we need to do this, right? Kind of reverse engineer and show people why there's no information. Because if we just say we cannot give you all of the answers, people are going to make up their own answers.
Yeah.
And
right.
that, on top of everything else people experience, that may trigger all kinds of reactions. And again, all of this creates a lot of tension. Plus the worrying about the economy, about the jobs, future of jobs. So people experience a lot of this stress. And going back to the foundations, why we care about that is because it impacts the quality of work. It impacts whether we can do the job as the organization and deliver on our promise to our customers. So provide as much rationale for people so that they understand why information is not available. Reverse engineer. So in order for us to have this answer, we need to have this. In order to have this, we need to have that. And all of those steps. You don't have to disclose anything that's confidential, of course not, but people want to understand the logic. They want to understand the high picture.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Obviously, there's so much external information, wider information that is being thrown at us from government, your own council, municipality, wherever it may be. One thing I do want to touch on, Anna, if I could, and I know we want to create a series out of this because there's so many things we can talk about pertaining to this topic, but we're seeing on the news, I'm being one of those people that is being carried away by what I'm listening to in the news. Not that I'm overly worried, but you're seeing record levels of unemployment being filed, furloughs, people are getting depressed, distressed, and companies are doing the best that they can to communicate what they're doing to keep people upbeat. How do people in these times remain hopeful? How can they just have a sense of purpose? I know you've touched on a lot of this, but especially where it pertains to job losses. Whether you like it or not, there's a lot of economic impact out there, particularly to some industries, particularly to a lot of the companies that our listeners who invest in are experiencing. So maybe talk to us a bit about hopefulness and what they can do to just keep themselves chirpy.
That's a great point, and there are two parts to it. First is the information we are hearing about unemployment, just those humongous numbers of how many people are applying for unemployment. Just again, notice how that impacts and what it triggers, probably anxiety, maybe some panic, worrying, right? So just noticing the thoughts, because those thoughts will then trigger how we feel, and how we feel will impact the actions we take. And every piece of information we can process in so many different ways. We can certainly, some people may not have enough savings, or whatever help they're getting may not be sufficient, or they may be stressed. But there are other opportunities. There are organizations that are actually have an increased demand in the current situation. So it's the way we look at things. But before we can look at things with a positive view, we want to notice how we're processing the information, right? Once we process, it's not to kind of bottle in the impact, like, all right, I'm gonna just not worry about it, I'm gonna do it. It's not about forcing through to think positively. It's really connecting with the emotional side first, so that you address whatever pain points came up. And then only then you can think positively, because if we bottle everything into the bottle, all of those negative thoughts, and just close it up and say, I'm not going to think about it, and I'm going to focus on my job, well, that bottle is going to pop up at some point, right? And wide open, and those emotions are going to flood over. So, and this is where the opportunity to really transform in the moment right now, to practice the self-coaching techniques, is to notice how what we're seeing and how we're processing, right? How it impacts us, connect with those things, and learn to change the thoughts, learn to adjust them without forcing. And then once we learn how to change the thoughts and think about things positively in a very organic way, in a very natural way, then our positive thinking becomes like an automatic for us, right? So whatever happens, that self-coaching kicks in, and then we can look at the situations from so many different angles. Oh, if I'm going to lose my job, for example, I can use the time. I always wanted to have extra time to do something, right? So we can look at things in different ways, and maybe even develop a different set of skills. Maybe look at what else is possible. So there are different ways, as I said, we can look at the same situation. The first thing is to notice how we process things, and then apply self-coaching techniques to learn to think positively. Now, in terms of being hopeful and hopeless, it falls from that. So if we're, let's say, within the organization, if letting people go is imminent, then as leaders and managers, there are a number of things we can do, and maybe one of the probably the biggest thing is to help people leave the organization hopeful rather than hopeless, powerless, and depressed. And there are the way it's through the communication, through opening up challenge for them to support their motivation while they're still a part of the organization. And that's where the human side of leadership comes in, the human side of managing an organization. Of course, we're worried about results. Of course, we need to make numbers. Of course, where the cash flow is constrained, the budgets are constrained. But from a human side, that's where the power of it is, to help people leave the organization hopeful rather than hopeless, powerless, and depressed. And there are ways to do that. That would be my, as many organizations go through various experiences and letting people go. Toast, for example, right? I'm seeing so much support for people who lost their jobs. And for the majority, from what I'm hearing, is that they're very positive. it is an opportunity, whether someone is going to take the time to think what they're going to want to do next, to realize their full potential, to find what their full potential is, or unlimited potential. It's never full, it always grows, right? It's unlimited. Or they're going to jump into another job or look for another job right away, or they're just learn something new. So it can be very supportive, and it all depends on how leadership and managers also go about that. But for the leadership and managers to go in the most human way possible to go around that is for the leadership and managers to be in their best self state, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why we want leadership and managers to take care of themselves first, because everybody is impacted. So for us to be compassionate as leaders and managers, we need to address our own needs. We need to apply the same techniques, how what we're seeing and hearing impacts us. What is our emotional state? Don't bottle it inside the bottle just because you're a leader manager and you just have to be positive all the time. No, you want to address those feelings inside as well. And then you can be the best leader and manager you can be for your people.
Well, those are fantastic trinket words. Thank you, Anna. I see a lot of folk being, and certainly I know I am, being that much more introspective, trying to find my own zen and equanimity. You seem like someone that is there. Oop, as my phone goes off, I beg your pardon. But, I would say, let me just switch that off. I would say, as we're all being introspective and as we're about to end, how are you sort of keeping yourself occupied, Anna? You seem like someone who's been under a banyan tree for a long time and in that mode. But how are you keeping yourself occupied? And perhaps we can learn off of you as to what you're doing.
I actually apply the same techniques I shared with you. I shared with you it's a very high level, but I apply the same techniques. I notice how what I'm seeing and hearing impacts my thoughts. And of course, it takes practice. And I've been practicing this for a number of years. And I've gone through my own personal transformation by applying these various techniques and noticing, just making sure that whatever emotional comes up, certain things that do impact, and I do limit how much of the information about things actually read and look at. And sometimes I don't even look at anything for a couple of days, or just do like a very quick 5 minutes check-in. All right, where are we at and what's coming up? But really, you want to notice how it's impacting it. And I practice all of these things. And one of the biggest things for me is really, it's connecting with nature, just going out there, going for a walk, to the extent that you can, find your zen place. And it's very important to be okay and know that it's okay to wanting and needing time for yourself. We are constrained within our homes, and some people are constrained within small apartments. And we may feel we have to be like all together all the time, and I have to take care of the kids, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. Just make sure just know that it's totally okay to be wanting and needing and taking the time for yourself, even if it's 15 minutes a day, because we're all unique and we all have our own unique systems and we all have our unique energy. And to be the best for our families, family members, and for our team and for our organization, we need to reconnect with who we are, our own inner power. And usually it's done in a solitary place. That's when we have the time to ourselves, when we don't have like external distractions. To the extent possible, nature just in and of itself is the best medium for doing that.
Yeah. Great words of wisdom that allows you to contemplate and almost be in a meditative state and takes you within. Well, Anna, look, thank you so much. And it was a fascinating discussion. I know we've got more of these planned because there's so much to talk about. But I hope, in fact, I know that our listeners would have enjoyed this conversation. Again, more of these to come as part of a series. But Anna, thank you very much for the moment. And we'll hear from you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Vic. Have a great rest.
Bye-bye.